So again, really excited to be here. And as I see people in the chat, I recognize names and organizations. So that's awesome. Oops, not able to advance my slides for some reason. Here we go. Okay. So a little bit about me. 20 years of nonprofit consulting experience. I've worked with about 150 nonprofits over the last 20 years. I have about 15 years of board service, small and large, and it's very large nonprofits. I'm also a mentor in the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits Hoffman House Fellowship Program that helps to train directors. If you haven't learned about it, you need to check it out. It's awesome. I'm also an adjunct graduate professor with New England College. Previously, I ran a 40-person New Hampshire nonprofit as the executive director for 5 years. So I've been on both sides of this equation. And this topic is I'm really passionate about it. I've had some really good experiences. I've had a lot of late nights up, et cetera, et cetera. Previous to all that, I have 20 years of management experience at some Fortune 100 companies, invited speaker on a number of topics. I have a number of certificates, and my passions are listed below. So let's get into it. This is the agenda. We're going to start with talking about why the partnership matters, the chair and ED relationship, roles, communication, strengthening alignment and focus, common challenges, and actionable steps for both boards and EDs and CEOs. So this presentation has been not only informed by my experience, but a number of governance experts as listed below. So why does this partnership matter? So I've worked with a lot of boards, and where I've seen an effective partnership where there's trust and clear collaboration between the executive and the board, the organization is rocking and rolling and thriving. Where I've seen the opposite, where there's disagreement, lack of understanding of roles, it's really problematic. And I've experienced both, and I've actually been on the ED side and the board chair side. I've been on the side of both some good and some bad. And clearly, it's different when the collaboration is really working well. And hopefully, many of you experience that a lot, or at least a little bit. And I'm here to talk with you about how to experience more often. So, the power of the relationship, it stabilizes the entire governance system and organization. Think about pilots in a cockpit, two pilots. If they're communicating well, they understand their role, you're having a nice flight. If they don't, there's a lot of turbulence. So very similar with the ED, the chief executive and the board relationship. We'll get into that a little bit more. So roles, John Carver mentioned above, he's one of the world-renowned experts in board governance. In general, the board set direction. They provide governance. The chief executives lead the execution and the operations. Having an understanding, clear boundaries are very, very critical in the board and the chief executive performing well and working well together and partnering. And that's really what it's about, partnering. So that said, it may sound simple, but I've lived this for almost 20 years, and really understanding and clarifying the roles and having them written down in policy and then reviewing them and then updating them and living them is easier said than done. And sometimes the roles can shift and they can be different depending on where you are as a board and organization. In other words, a founding board or a fully performing and governing board, they can be different. So communication in any relationship, right? Communication relates to trust. With the board and the chief executive relationship, it's very important that there be regular communication that's defined and agreed upon ahead of time, check-ins to make sure that both the board and the chief executive are aligned. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about that. It should not be a situation where there's only communication when there's a crisis. Strengthening alignment and focus. So this is another kind of key to most relationships in general anyway. Um, are there clear goals that folks agree on? Are you aligned on it? Are you focusing on what is important? So hopefully all organizations in this chat have strategic plans. If you don't, it's another topic to look into, but I'm going to assume that most, or at least many of you do. And that should always anchor the discussions, decisions, and initiatives as they come up and help to make sure that you're working the priorities. And accountability comes in because there should be regular discussions within board meetings where you are relative to the key priorities of your strategic plan. Again, this helps to provide focus. What is the organization about, the mission and vision, and what are the strategic goals? Tackling common challenges. So it typically revolves around roles. And in some of the boards I've been involved with, we actually talk about roles pretty regularly and reminding ourselves what are our roles. And at times, the roles may change depending on what the organization is going through. There may be a time where it's required for the board to be more involved, but that has to be done and decided upon with clear communication and agreement with the executive director. There may be times where the board is more hands-off. And again, that needs to be defined between both the chief executive and the board, because sometimes the roles can move a little bit, but it's all about communication and setting the right expectations. So actionable steps for boards. If you don't have policies that clearly spell out the role of the chief executive and the role of the board, you need to have policies that state that clearly, and all boards should have board policies in general. There needs to be an agreement between the chief executive and the board, particularly the chairman of the board, as far as how often do they get together on a regular basis. And typically, I recommend at least once in between board meetings. That is if you have monthly board meetings. If you have quarterly board meetings, the chief executive and the chair of the board should get together on a monthly basis. And the check-in should be structured minimum of a half an hour up to an hour to discuss what's going on, what are the issues, setting agendas for the meetings, setting priorities, checking on a strategic plan. And there needs to be a culture of the chief executive working collaboratively as a partner with the board, not just to report status, but as a clear partner in moving the organization forward strategically. Action steps for the ED and the chief executive is to help promote that strategic partnership and not just the transactional reporting. And both the chief executive and the chairman of the board need to realize that their relationship, the chief executive and the chairman of the board, is the most important relationship in that organization. Okay, so I've moved pretty quickly. I want to touch on a couple of points. I'm going to backtrack. Action steps for boards. Boards need to have an annual board assessment, and the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits has an outstanding one. It's kind of recognized nationally. And I personally have used that as I've sat on boards and as well as a consultant. That's my 2-minute warning. Okay, so and as a relation to that, the ED chief executive needs to have an annual performance review. So this is typically done with the executive committee, and the chief executive needs to have goals set on an annual basis that she or he is evaluated on. And the evaluation shouldn't just take place at the end of the year. There should be quarterly check-ins to see how the executive's doing. So those are some other actionable steps. I do have some additional ones and a more expanded presentation that covers all of these topics we went through rather quickly, but with several more bullets with detail on that. My intent here was to kind of prime the pump so folks can be ready to ask questions around these topics. Quick summary: strong partnerships depend on clarity, alignment, communication, shared leadership. And again, the chair chief executive relationship is really key to high functioning board. Small routines like the regular check-in with the chair and the chief executive are really critical. And boards and chief executives are most powerful when they co-create strategy and accountability. Again, a partnership, not a reporting, not simply a reporting relationship. So we're going to open up the conversation. Feel free to share what's working, what's hard, what do you want to strengthen, and any and all questions. I'm happy to take them. Thank you. Turning it over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Tom.